We're speaking at the end of the school year here in Texas, just to set the stage a little bit. If you could give summer camp safety a grade in America, based on all your work and experience, what grade would you give?
From what I've learned over the last 5-6 years, not just with my family's experience with Kanakuk camps, but then also the Camp Mystic situation and doing a landscape assessment. I mean, the camp industry has been around 140-ish years, and it's hard to answer that because you kind of have to go state by state to give a grade. There's such a disparity and difference in the laws and regulatory environments in all of the 50 states in the US. But as an industry, I would have to say there's not been much accomplished in that century past that actually is kid-focused and safety first. A lot of these camp associations have lobbied for waivers and exemptions. And that's what I think has surfaced in all of these tragedies that we're so now acutely aware of in the camp industry, is that the industry needs an overhaul and kids' safety has to come first. There has to be accountability, transparency, and parents need to know what questions to ask before they're entrusting their child to any youth serving organization, but especially an overnight camp, a summer camp or a youth camp. So I look forward to digging into that with you more today. And thank you for your interest, Jenna, and for including me in this conversation right as we're about to hit summer camp season.
Well, the timing couldn't be better. And I really believe, Elizabeth, this is one of the most important conversations SmartHER News has had. And you just gave us a great sort of overview of why we have to talk about this issue. Just to give you a more formal introduction, Elizabeth Phillips is a leading national voice on camp safety, youth camp safety, summer camp safety. And she does have a few key areas of focus that we're going to highlight today. And just something to consider for our audience, I really like to produce news that is available and accessible to the entire family. But the subject matter that we're going to talk about today is challenging because we love our children. And we want them to be safe and happy and healthy and have all the great things available to them here in the United States. And so we're going to focus a little bit on these, a multitude of different topics. And I think it's going to be very, very valuable. Before I get to that, just because in case we could lose people towards the end, people may break up an interview. Elizabeth, I know I have to do that based on my schedule as a mom of 3. And I know you're a mom of 3. Before you go to camp.com, is a great resource. And Elizabeth's going to tell us a little bit about it in a second that can set a primer for you about what questions to ask and what to think about before you get into the summer, before you go to camp.com. So we'll get to that in a moment. But Elizabeth, let's just learn a little bit about you. You were born and raised in Texas. I've listened to and enjoyed many interviews that you've done, enough to know that when you were a little girl, I don't know if camp safety and passing legislation was on the top of your dreams. When you were growing up in Texas, tell us a little bit about your youth, what your dreams were. What did you think you were going to be doing in your life?
I mean, it is ironic that this is where we've landed. I thought I might be in a role like you, doing something in media or communications. I did get a degree in corporate communications and public affairs, ultimately. I was born in Boston. That's what my passport says. But I don't feel like a Yankee because I grew up in Dallas and Atlanta.
And as you know, once you're in Texas, you get adopted into the fold. And so I don't even know if I've seen that anywhere. Everyone says Dallas, 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 Elizabeth.
Exactly. So I am very much a Dallas girl and honored to be chair of the Dallas Foundation, where I get to see just so many good things happening in this community. And my husband's from North Carolina, where we also spend a lot of time. And we have, like you said, 3 young kids. And I think becoming a mother changed my perspective on life, as it does for all of us, right? Where your priorities shift and you'll do anything to keep your kids safe. And the way I see the world now as a mom of 3 is that it does take a village. And, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to protect a child. And so that's where my focus has shifted now that I'm almost 40, is I see every child as my child. We should all see children as our children and do everything we can to protect them.
I couldn't agree more. And you said it so eloquently. It's true. You look at all these children, they're strangers on the street. But if you're a mom, you have one eye on them, making sure, are they going to run across that parking lot? You just suddenly you exist in the world differently. And it doesn't mean to say that someone that doesn't have children of their own doesn't care for children. It's just something unique that you can experience in motherhood. You went to summer camp. Summer camp was a part of your family culture. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, growing up in Dallas, that was just part of the American childhood tradition. And I went for 7 years to Kanakuk camps in the outskirts of Branson, Missouri. And I liked some years more than others. I won't say that I was a diehard camp girl by any means, but I would go to the 2-week terms at Kanakuk, and my brothers as well. And then I had a ton of friends who have been sending their kids there until very recently, because it's a generational thing at a lot of these camps. And I think that's something that may not be widely understood if it's not part of the culture you grew up in. But for a lot of families, this is a generational tradition. And as I said, American summer camps have been around for over 140 years, and regulations have not kept up or have not caught up since this industry really burgeoned and became the American tradition it is.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I grew up in a community that did not have generational summer camps. I
Mhm.
think my main vision for summer camp came through The Parent Trap. This amazing idea of like, oh my gosh, look at these camps. And it is something really important to understand. And now that I live in a different community, to understand that generational tradition. And it was really important when reporting last year on the horrific flooding in the Texas Hill Country that affected so many camps, including Camp Mystic, which I know a lot of our audience will recognize. Because in order to understand the attachment to the place and to the camp itself, you need to know that family history and how much it was part of a family identity as well. How old were you when you went to camp?
I think I started going around age 7, and that was for a 1-week term. And then the older you got, the longer you could stay at camp. And so some people would go for a month in high school every summer. And then with Kanakuk, you can become a counselor after that. Then you can go to the Kanakuk Institute. There's also a link year, gap year program between high school and college they offer. So the Kanakuk pipeline starts very young with family camp. You can take your toddlers to Cape Hawaii, go to one of the other, I think, 6 or 7 camps that are different time lengths or themes or different age groupings. And then, go through high school counselor, and then all the way through this, what they call a master's program in ethics, the Kanakuk Institute. And so people do get fiercely loyal because that's what they know, and it's a part of their identity. And similar to identity politics, like that is something that we've seen with these camps. And I've gotten death threats for just speaking the truth about what's happened at Kanakuk. And then with Camp Mystic, there's been just another wave of that coming up, victim families who lost daughters, so much hate, and it's just been visceral. And I, make it my North Star to stand with survivors and to listen to people with the closest proximity to an issue as possible before I jump in and try to do anything about a situation or an issue. And so with the Camp Mystic tragedy of last summer, it's been the Heavens 27 parent coalition that really pushed for reforms in memory and honor of their daughters, so this never happens to another child. And very unfortunately, I did know a thing or two about the summer camp industry from what my family experienced, and my little brother Trey, who we lost sadly in 2019. He died by suicide after being silenced to his grave with an NDA Kanakuk put him under. So he survived grooming and abuse at Kanakuk from age 7 to 17 roughly, and then his perpetrator went to prison for 3 life terms. And then when he pursued justice through the civil courts, there's a deadline on that, and it depends on the zip code in which you were harmed as a child, how long you have to file civil litigation. So that's another problem I'm seeking to change, is statute of limitations reform, because victims shouldn't be on the clock. But he had to turn around from at 21 years old, seeing his perpetrator sentenced to 3 life terms, and then under Texas law at the time, file by age 23 in civil court to seek justice against other liable parties, because the perpetrator did not act alone. The institution had protected and promoted him in that context. So that's Kanakuk. So, once my brother died in 2019, I started going down this journey and realized, wait, what's going on with camps and insurance companies and NDAs silencing child sex abuse victims? And then that led to more questions. And as a journalist, think this way too. You just start getting inquisitive, like, well, how is this system, serving the protection of kids, if it's aligned towards insurance premiums and protecting a brand's reputation over ensuring children aren't raped or harmed or in the Camp Mystic situation, sadly killed at summer camp. So it's become my agenda to ensure that children have safe summers and that child sexual abuse victims have access to the courts whenever they're ready to come forward.
A lot of threads to pull on there, and we're going to work through each of those. Before we do, though, I'm so sorry for your loss, Elizabeth, because I know despite the amazing work that you have advocated for in the following years after Trey's passing, that we'd give it all back if we could have our loved one back with us. So I'm so sorry that your family had to navigate that. When did you first learn that his experience at camp was different than your experience at camp? When did that surface in your family?
I didn't, because of the NDA, I didn't really know much. I learned more about what happened to Trey and his death than I ever knew in his life.
Really?
Yes. And that's why we've started pushing Trey's law to end the misuse of NDAs. They've been weaponized against child sexual abuse and trafficking victims for far too long. That should have never been a thing. NDAs were created for, I use this line in testimony all the time, trade secrets, like the Coca-Cola recipe, not trauma secrets. And so, once I learned that he wasn't talking about what happened to him was due to this very intimidating NDA that Kanakuk specifically requested and added additional settlement value to in order for him to sign the settlement agreement. And he was at his wit's end and just signed on the dotted line to get it over with. And then, regretted it, so he couldn't even share about his worst trauma in therapeutic settings, was too scared to talk about it with most of his friends and even family. But towards the end of his life, he did let me in a little bit. And I was attending, therapy sessions with him where I would hear things and just, start feeling like, what happened to you? I don't have the full picture here. I can't fix you. I can't fix it. But then when Trey's law passed in Texas last session, I, for the first time, got to see the NDA he'd signed. That went into effect last September 1st, 2025. And now I really do understand why he was so scared to speak about his trauma. And Kanakuk aggressively came after another John Doe's family for refusing to sign the NDA. They got federally sanctioned, had to pay $40,000 out of pocket to defend themselves against this move by Kanakuk. And so all these other victims knew that it happened to this early John Doe, and they zipped it. And in my brother's case, it killed him. But he's not the only suicide that we know of related to Kanakuk abuse. So that's, the not so fun part of the story. And so I had to decide, am I going to let my grief sit and just, be a sad sister, or am I going to channel this pain into purpose? And I decided to land at a point where I realized grief is love. Love requires action, and pushing for Trey's law and to save other survivors' voices so that they don't have his outcome has become my new mission. And we can talk more about how that's evolved over the last several years.
Yeah, let's absolutely do that now. So, and just so people know a little bit about Trey, maybe I can add a couple bullet points, then you can fill in some of the blanks too. Elizabeth, handsome, younger brother, great at sports, football player, lacrosse, Eagle Scout, smart, doing internships at the biggest universities in the country, well-loved by his community, successful, he's in high school. He sounds great. He sounds like he was the epitome of what we talk about, an all-American teenager. I mean, do I have it correctly? This is just looking at his picture that I was looking at and learning a little bit about his background. So through these high school years, he's still more or less going about his life in a quote unquote normal way. Elizabeth, there weren't any signs of
pretty high functioning.
Something he was hiding, very high functioning, which absolutely can be the case, obviously.
And, hindsight is 2020. And whenever a child's abused, the parent's going to blame themselves for the rest of their lives for not noticing the signs. But with Trey, he was doing great in school. He had plenty of friends. He was popular, athletic, all the things you just said. And thank you for remembering Trey there for a minute.
Well, and then the neuroscientist part, I'm like, this guy, I know we're gonna, and look at his inspiration that he's carried forward, and he was in. I just really want people to know, because one of the things that you've talked about, and there's so many things that you've said that have sat with me as a mother, but one of the points that you have brought up in a series of interviews, and I don't want to forget to add here, is that we may think that children, teenagers, young people are going to talk about their trauma, but statistics show us something very different. And we need to understand those stats, Elizabeth, to understand why the NDA legal apparatus is important. So talk to our audience a little bit about that. What are the statistics for child abuse in America? What are the statistics for when people actually come forward and talk about what happened to them?
Yes, so there's now tons of research on a phenomenon called delayed disclosure. And what we know, what research tells us, the latest study out of the University of New Hampshire, a professor named Dr. Finkelhor is really one of the national experts on this. The latest study said 1 in 8 children will be abused by their 18th birthday in the US. CAC's Children Advocacy Centers of Texas came out with data that 1 in 6 children will be abused before their 18th birthday in Texas. There are a lot of studies, and it's hard to study this because of the delayed disclosure issue, but most people take an average of 20 years to tell anyone. And then, a third of victims statistically don't come forward until between the age of 50 and 70. Another third never disclose at all. They take it to their grave. And that's because of grooming and manipulation and all the tactics that perpetrators use to shame you into silence, to keep you quiet, saying things like, I'll hurt your family if you ever tell. And, that's just stuck in a kid's mind, whether or not they know it's realistic or not realistic. They are just psychologically so groomed and brainwashed in a lot of these cases where they do not go to their parent immediately. And so Trey's crash didn't happen until his 20s. Like we were just saying, high school, he seemed all-American, well-rounded, could have gone to college anywhere. He was brilliant. I think he would have just kept getting PhD after PhD and been a perpetual academic. He was just that smart and inquisitive. But it caught up with him after the criminal investigation closed, and then the civil lawsuit really broke him. Every time there was a deposition or something.
Can I pause you there? The criminal investigation into his perpetrator, was he the source of that, or was he kind of caught in the dragnet of that? And please share with our audience how many victims it's known that Trey's perpetrator, who is serving multiple life sentences, had. What we know, not the official number.
Yeah. So in the criminal investigation, the prosecutor estimated a true victim count in the hundreds, and that was in 2010 at the time of sentencing. But they'd identified in the criminal investigation around 56 male boy victims. And Trey was named as a victim in the criminal investigation. So he didn't have
and that wasn't by choice, right? He was just kind of pulled into that and part of that whole process. Is that how this kind of surfaced for him?
So I always say he didn't have the luxury of delayed disclosure, not that that's a luxury, but he was forced to deal with this before he was ready. And so that's why we work so hard. And to answer your question about the legal side of this, to reform statute of limitations, because if you were abused as a child in Texas, for example, between 1995 and 2015, you only have until your 23rd birthday as a victim to pursue justice through the civil courts. In Missouri, where Kanakuk operates, that's the age of 26 to hold your perpetrator and liable parties accountable in civil courts in Missouri. There are over 33, it might be 34 now, U.S. states and territories that have opened what's called a look-back window, or have had some level of statute of limitations reform to allow previously expired claims to be brought forth in a time-bound window. So revival window is another word for it, look-back window. Louisiana has one of these right now. There are many other states that have had them open and closed, but it brings forward these hidden predators that have been barred from any accountability, victims barred from the courts to seek justice because of these arbitrary deadlines that are dependent on state policy.
And those arbitrary deadlines are from when? Like, when did we decide that 26, like, you're good, you can't say anything? When you're 27, you can't say anything. When did that even come about?
So that's a law that's gone unchanged in Missouri since 1939. And we've been fighting for 5 years for statute of limitations reform in Missouri. And the reason, people ask me all the time, why isn't Kanakuk shut down by now? How have they not been sued out of business? Well, the underbelly of that is that the insurance lobby, tort reform, oftentimes the Chamber of Commerce will testify against our statute of limitations reform bill because they're worried about financial interests of camps, church, whatever liable institution might have to pay out restitution to these survivors. And a lot of them are even Christian ministries or so-called Christian ministries. And I just don't see the Jesus in that. I think scripture is pretty clear that if you harm a child, God has strong thoughts on that. And that anyone who harms a child, move out of the way. Let's get this done for kids. And in Missouri, our joint resolution failed again this session. It did not pass, was blocked by Senate leadership this year, unfortunately. But we will keep
And why?
fighting.
What is the reason for that? Like because you've received a lot of bipartisan support. So just taking a big step back, for these NDAs that non-disclosure agreements, they can come up in a variety of different ways in one's life. It doesn't have to be something as horrific as what Trey went through. It could be something else, as you mentioned, trade secrets. We have an NDA at SmartHER News that we have for people that are working with us, so they can't go start SmartHER News somewhere else. They're not all the same. But in the way that they can be used when it comes to abuse, there's multiple ways for them to be used. But let's just say you're deciding that you would like to pursue legal action against an entity, and it's going to be a very, very long case. It's going to cost a lot of money. And you may be advised by your lawyer, like, listen, we could take this to court or we could just settle. And they're going to give you a couple $1 million. I'm just making up that figure. Mm-hmm. They're going to give you some money and you just put this behind you. You don't have to worry about this years of work. And this is just going to be good for everybody. In exchange for that, though, you often have to promise your silence and risk everything if you break that silence. So it's an exchange for your story. So you're trading your story for that. And Elizabeth, one of the things you talk about is there are ways that NDAs make sense. But when someone's young and abused, that maybe it doesn't make sense in that capacity. So walk us through, when we talk about Trey's law, both at a state level and now at a federal level where it's being introduced as well, or has been introduced, what specifically is Trey's law?
Yes, so Trey's law ends the misuse of NDAs against child sexual abuse and trafficking victims in civil settlement agreements specifically. So it's already illegal to put someone under an NDA to cover up a crime. That doesn't hold, but victims might not know that and be scared to talk about the criminal elements of their case. In a situation like my brother's, he filed a civil lawsuit and did not want to go to trial with it, did not want to put me, I was pregnant with one of my children when he was going through his civil litigation, didn't want to put his pregnant sister through depositions and things. So he had reasons to just close it out, get this behind him, to your point, move on, and have some funds for therapy, lost income, all the things that survivors need to survive. And money doesn't fix it, but it certainly can help. But I haven't met one survivor, and I am now a certified crime victim advocate, who says, I'm going into this for the cash. They are going into it for accountability, justice, healing, and then the actual need for funds to get the help that will be a huge part of their healing, ideally. In my brother's case, he was not healed this side of heaven. But yes, that's how it plays out. And even a plaintiff's lawyer, it's standard practice in personal injury law, sign the settlement agreement, put it behind you. We can avoid the stress of a trial, but you have to do it in exchange for your silence. I think in any other context, we'd call that a bribe. Your voice in exchange for restitution. And you're right, there are, with intellectual property, or there's a need for confidentiality in the corporate sector for a variety of reasons. Not all NDAs are bad, but Trey's law ends the misuse of NDAs against child sexual abuse and trafficking cases, against the victims of those cases. And so that's what this does. And it's swept through now 7 states. So it started in Texas and Missouri, and we've now passed Georgia, Alabama. We failed in Oklahoma. That was a wild journey and interesting to see the opposition there. But we have also been filed in U.S. Congress, both in the Senate and the House. And if this passes, federally, then we no longer have to go state by state to just set a baseline standard of we don't put kids under NDAs. Kids can't consent to contracts anyways. So why have we been doing this? And oftentimes it's the guardian or the parent who signs this on behalf of their child because they aren't a lawyer and maybe don't understand what they're signing completely, that their child's lost their innocence and they're signing away their voice on top of that. It might not be fully comprehended by the parent or guardian for years later when the child wants to write a book or talk about their story or speak on a podcast like this, and they are legally prohibited from doing so. So we're
and by the way, some of these NDAs, it's not, you can't even do it generally. It's not that you can't just say the name or where you're from. It's like that whole part of your life is packaged and put on a shelf, and you can't. And I think that's really important to point out. You mentioned what's happening in the federal level. There's a lot of bipartisan support, which is, I could tell you, as someone that covers a lot of politics, we don't have a lot of bipartisan support for a lot of things. So it makes it unique already. And there is some hope. Is there hope, Elizabeth, that you could see this potentially move in the Senate and the House before the midterm elections? Have you been given any sort of guidance on what a timeline could look for the House or the Senate to consider this?
Yeah, so we should be up on the Senate floor very soon now that we've passed out of Judiciary Committee, unanimously gained 10 co-sponsors. I was with friends last night who said they watched it, and it was like The Voice when all the judges turn their chairs around together and want the same contestant. That's what it felt like. People saying, I want to co-sponsor, I want to co-sponsor, both sides of the aisle. And that this is bipartisan, and this is so common sense, and it's something we can do to protect kids. It's a way to do something in a time where we feel maybe hopeless and powerless over the state of the world, and like, why is Congress not acting to protect children or survivors, having their voices amplified? Trey's law is an opportunity to at least remove the barrier of silence from the situation. So that's what I'm excited about with recent momentum. And I think, yes, to answer your question, by the midterms, this should be moving swiftly along. We've had no opposition to date. And our Senate sponsors and co-sponsors are keeping an eye out on that. We just newly filed in the House, so starting to work the other chamber now, but only positive and supportive feedback so far, because everybody wants to do something like this to help kids.
So with all that said, what happened in Oklahoma? You said it was kind of a wild ride. Like, when you see that bipartisan support on Capitol Hill, but you don't see it in the states, I'm trying to think about always thinking about multiple perspectives. And you can speak directly about Oklahoma or not. I know you're probably going to start, you would want the legislation to move forward there, certainly. But when we're considering the other side, if there is another side, is it the insurance companies that are saying, okay, we need to understand that liability is not indefinite, and so therefore we do need NDAs for children? I mean, I'm trying to intellectually understand what would be the resistance to it, because it sounds practical. But how can you describe the opposition?
So now that there's been sine die in Oklahoma, which means session has adjourned, we did hear from the Senate floor leader and President Pro Tem in Oklahoma as to their reasoning. It was very bizarre to me. I did a video on Instagram reacting to the things they had said. But basically, they had an issue with the Cindy Clement-Shire Act part of the bill. So Trey's law was filed with Cindy Clement-Shire's Act, and that would eliminate the criminal statute of limitations in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is one of 6 states that has yet to fully eliminate the criminal statute of limitations for child sexual abuse and trafficking claims. And that right now in Oklahoma, it's 45 is the deadline to press charges against a perpetrator, a pedophile. And so we thought this was a low-hanging fruit bill. They can join the rest of the country, and actually federally, the criminal statute of limitations on this issue was removed in 2006. Civilly, it was removed in 2022, not retroactively, but prospectively. And so Oklahoma is just an awkward outlier in this whole movement where Trey's law did not pass. And they said it was because of issues they had with the Cindy Clement-Shire Act part of the bill. And that is where I think our quote to the media in Oklahoma was baffled. We are baffled by this because the reasoning thrown out did not make sense. But you brought up insurance, and that is who opposes our statute of limitations reform work at a national level. Every state I've been to, the insurance lobby comes at us pretty hard, and they do a lot of work behind the scenes to kill any statute of limitations reform as it pertains to crimes against children. They don't want to have to pay out these settlements, and they want to protect their clients. The clients themselves want to protect their brands and image. And so kids just aren't being centered or prioritized. Victims of child sexual abuse are seen as a problem, a PR issue, not our most precious and valuable assets in society.
Yeah, this is really interesting. You wonder, I have to work through some of that, how one can make the calculation of we need to protect the entity versus protect the child, because you could just not protect the entity that has a lot of allegations against it. Or you could just not do that. And then you remove the risk altogether to your insurance company, right? But as you point out, the camp that you mentioned that you attended is a very large camp that has a lot of different business pieces to it that earns millions and millions of dollars. So I'll leave that for our audience to contemplate and consider. What has surprised you most about this journey with Trey's laws specifically, and what you've learned along the way?
Yeah, so really this journey started out on the statute of limitations reform side of things, because I started connecting with other Kanakuk survivors. I used to refer to my brother as a survivor. He didn't survive, so I refer to him now as a victim. But there are Kanakuk abuse survivors that are part of this Facts About Kanakuk community, and they've contributed information that we've been able to put up on factsaboutkanakuk.com. Kanakuk is the camp I attended. It's where my brother was abused, even though he was also abused around the world and across state lines, like a lot of the Pete Newman victims. Pete Newman was my brother's perpetrator. He's in prison in Jefferson City, Missouri for 3 life terms, but he was up for parole after serving only 15. Another issue we have to address in Missouri, add to list. But when I realized that these victims were under NDAs, these survivors could not testify. My brother's voice went with him to the grave. He couldn't testify. Then we had these Newman and Kanakuk survivors who were under NDAs and uncomfortable testifying in a hearing. So that's when I pivoted to Trey's Law, which was named Trey's Law by Representative Jeff Leach in Texas in his honor. And once we got that legislation underway, victims were able to have their voices back. So as I mentioned, Trey's Law in Texas went into effect last September. So what we saw this session in Missouri and other states where we were working on statute of limitations reform, survivors had their voices back. And I think one of the most powerful examples of this was a young man who came forward in his full name for the first time. He said, "I'm no longer John Doe. My NDA no longer applies, and I'm here in my full name to testify on behalf of this Senate joint resolution that would open the door for future statute of limitations reform in the state of Missouri." One of the most powerful moments in the last 5 years of changing laws was the healing that can come through this process. Of course, it's disappointing when a bill fails, and in this case, that joint resolution did not pass. But that survivor came forward in his name for the first time in over 20 years. And those are the moments I'll never forget. We had another one in Georgia, a Newman victim, Kanakuk survivor. He testified for Trey's Law in Georgia, which did pass. It was a priority bill of Governor Kemp and his wife, First Lady Kemp. God bless them for making this a priority, one of 11 bills addressing child abuse and trafficking that they prioritized this session. And we had a survivor come forward for the first time publicly in that hearing too. And so now that we have Trey's Law giving these victims their voices back, they're able to advocate. And I am not the sole voice now on behalf of Trey showing up. We have an army of survivors ready to make change. But it is exhausting, and they tap in and out depending on where they are on their unique healing journeys. But I consider it a sacred honor to get to be witness to that.
I was thinking about how earlier you said, you were thinking about a career in media or journalism, and all you want to do as a journalist is to be able to shine light on important stories. Like, that's the whole point, is service to the community, and how you've experienced that in a different way, to be able to give someone the power back in their story, which is, when you see it happen, is life-changing. It changes their whole posture in the way that they move through the world when they're able to actually tell the story that they want in an accurate way. How's that been for you, Elizabeth? Like, I'm just thinking about the time, the resources. You have 3 little kids. Like, how has this journey been?
It comes at a cost. It definitely comes at a cost. And my husband, my children, we all had to agree that this was going to be something we put our energy towards. I'm not going to make every soccer game or every mealtime or event at school. But I had 6 hearings in 10 days at one point this session, just hopping state to state for hearings and supporting survivors in different jurisdictions as we move this legislation forward. And I let my kids see that. And I let them know when I'm exhausted or when I am energized, because this brave young man just came forward in Georgia, and this brave young woman just spoke at a podium in front of U.S. Congress and named her abuser publicly. And they know about their uncle's story and how we're choosing together to turn pain into purpose. I do this upside down P, pain into purpose, with my hand when, it says it better than words sometimes, especially with children. But when things come up in their lives that are hard, I'm like, how do we turn that pain into purpose? And that's what I get to do every day, is think about, how are we going to make the world better? How are we going to prevent this harm from happening in the future? And again, the Army has grown now to where I don't feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. It's a coalition of survivors, advocates, allies, legislators. I want people to hear that. Politicians aren't all bad. We've had some people fight to the end with us, just making sure that this bill gets prioritized, or encouraging us that next session we'll get it done, even though it wasn't a win this time. And so I have a lot of friends in state houses around the country, lobbyists who have been super helpful doing this work pro bono, even just because they care about it. And so there is that bright side and the silver linings along the way, the glimmers of hope and healing that are happening.
I want to share with you ways that your story, Trey's story, have informed me as a mother and a journalist, which is why we're doing this interview. I am embarrassed to admit, for someone who asks questions for a living, how few questions I ask about some of the very basic things my children are doing. Mm-hmm. We all know what it's like to get busy in the summer. My children don't go to sleepaway camp. Again, it's not a family tradition. Doesn't mean they won't ever. Certainly have some questions about it now more than ever. But I would say, sometimes you're in the middle of summer and you're like, wow, that looks like a great computer camp. Let's do that for a couple of days, get you busy. Am I sitting there asking the boss, like, oh, do you background check your counselors? Like, mm-hmm. How do you screen them? Mm-hmm. What if there's a storm here? Even in our area, I'm not too far from, about an hour and a half from where those terrible floods happened last July, but I live in an area where there's flooding. Mm-hmm. I've never asked about an evacuation plan or if they have an active shooter plan. I haven't asked about any of that. I'm like, can they go into the pool? Great. You're just like, this seems like a safe place. All of our friends go here. It'll be fine. I'm shocked and quite frankly, disappointed in myself that I do that. Mm-hmm. And that kind of leads us into the Hill Country floods in Camp Mystic. And again, this resource, before you go to camp.com, because it's a great resource. It walks parents through questions that they should ask and mm-hmm. just puts them in front of you. And you're going to read it, I promise you, and be like, I never asked that question. I should have. Yeah. So how did you get involved with the Camp Mystic families? Elizabeth, how did you get involved with this effort before you go to camp.com? I'm going to say it as many times as possible because I think it's great for all families. Just talk us through how your experience with Trey's Law then brought you into a whole entirely different storyline.
Yeah. And I think, parents do guilt themselves now in hindsight for not asking questions, but that is so normal. You're an inquisitive person. You're a protective mother. And this is just a blind spot that we've had in our society that we're seeking to now, help spoon feed to parents the questions to ask, to break down a complex topic into 9 categories. And that's what the parent guide does. And I created before you go to camp.com years ago, really focused around child sexual abuse prevention. I wasn't thinking about floods and all these other hazards at the time. But because I passed Trey's Law last session in Texas and also in Missouri, on July 4th, I had 3 friends in Dallas that lost their daughters at Camp Mystic. And so once the acute dust settled, they reached out and said, how did you pass Trey's law? Because we need to turn this pain into purpose. We cannot get through this. We cannot let it be in vain. We can't let this happen to another family. How do you pass a law? And so I reached out to the team on the ground in Austin that had helped me with Trey's law. And then several of the families lived in Houston and Austin and knew other lobbyists or people with connections to help. We knew the governor was going to call a special session, and state leadership wanted to do something. I mean, how could they not after the largest mass casualty of girls in the state? So this was not that it's a trauma competition, but more kids died than Uvalde, just to set the scope and scale of this tragedy. There hasn't been this loss of life at this scale since there was a fire in the 1950s in Chicago, a Catholic school. That tragedy is why we have fire drills, fire detectors, smoke alarms. And so these parents, it's still like it's so inspiring and chilling, and also beautiful that they decided in their raw grief that we are going to do something and to ensure other parents don't go through what we're going through. So that's kind of how the forces joined together. And I had just started the No More Victims Alliance for Trey's Law and the statute of limitations reform work. And then we just popped up a logo from Grok, used AI to create a logo that said Campaign for Camp Safety. And these parents, we went to Austin and their voices were heard in hearings. All the things that could have gone differently that would have spared their daughters from these horrific outcomes, these deaths. And so then the legislature was able to react and write this legislation, create the laws. Those were signed into effect so that starting this summer, camps are safer in Texas.
So I just recently saw this story. It actually came out over the last 24 hours before we started speaking here. And it's the headline talks about the dozens of camps in Texas that have shut down. And the reporting ties it to these new laws and requirements, saying not only that some of the requirements are difficult to achieve, but that they're expensive. Mm-hmm. And because of this, that's why we're seeing fewer camps in Texas this summer versus last summer. What are your thoughts on that? Based on what you know, do these new laws and restrictions actually create fewer camps because they are such a high bar to reach?
So I think, going back to how we started this conversation, this camp industry has been long overdue for reform. And so some of what we're seeing is misunderstanding and misinterpretation of the law or the rules that were put out by the Department of State Health Services. Most camps that reach out to the Department of State Health Services, which is called DSHS for short, that's the lingo in Texas, they get some clarity that, we don't have to shut down. That doesn't apply to us because we're not in a floodplain. But there has been some confusion by people just misinterpreting the laws on the books. And then there are other things. This was done in a special session, and there were other bills that did not pass in that special session that we hope do in the 2027 session. But what the families were focused on and what the Campaign for Camp Safety was focused on were common sense baseline measures, like don't have cabins in a floodway or a flood. It was nothing crazy, but I think what camps are experiencing are growing pains. The industry is experiencing growing pains from these regulations that do feel drastic after 145 years of no accountability structures. I mean, DSHS would come in and check boxes. They have volunteers at the American Camps Association that also comes and they do accreditation, but it's checking boxes. And are there any teeth behind that? So the camp industry, I think, is just in this moment of growing pains and trying to react and reform fast enough for this summer. And there are some, great camps and several Girl Scout camps as an example that got funds from our Safe Summers Fund, which we partnered on with the Safety Navigator. So the Safety Navigator is also who put out this parent guide in partnership with us, and the Safe Summers Fund grants to nonprofit camps to fill the gap. So not only passing the law, which is important, but then how do you get that implemented? And camps have been very appreciative of the Safety Navigator, which was started by parents that were close to this Camp Mystic tragedy, and said, we're going to do something to help camps implement the law, because we want kids to be safe, not just on paper, but in reality. And these are practical steps, templates, tools, subject matter consultants, expert consultants who can walk with camps through this process to ensure they're able to open, adhere to the new laws, and have kids there in an environment that's much safer than ever before.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I was stumbling upon this article in preparation for our conversation. It doesn't really mention that there's some grant money available for these camps to step into these new requirements if they need to, or support. And so that's an important part of the story that I think our audience should have for balance. But I'll put a link to that article so people could read it as well in our show notes. I want to ask you about something else related to Camp Mystic. It was, just recent news that the camp is not going to be reopening. There was an effort to reopen the camp after this horrific event that took place. There's a lot of strong opinions, a lot of debate, both in Texas, outside of Texas. I mean, this is a national story, a lot of national intrigue about it. As we mentioned, because there's also that cultural component. You have these generational families at this camp and a strong connection to it. And I, just in my own community, had been exposed to families that have been directly impacted by this. And those that really want Camp Mystic to reopen and really feel that that's what's best for children, is to have Camp Mystic that exists for them, obviously with some new improvements, but that Camp Mystic should reopen and should survive. And then there's others that obviously say that should not be the case, that there are some moments that there's an intersection and there's no continuing. Part of the voices that have been in support, because we talked about the power of this story, the support of Camp Mystic reopening, said, and they just said in a Texas Monthly piece, one mother said of her daughter's experience, it started out with the world saying, tell us your story. And now the word coming out of Houston, she's saying of these different groups, is don't tell anyone your story because it could be used against you or against Camp Mystic. What are your thoughts? I mean, you've seen this from your own perspective. What are your thoughts about the families that feel so passionately that this camp should still reopen, and that these other stories that happened that night of heroism need to also come out? What do you think about that?
I mean, I can speak from my family's experience with Kanakuk. It's so scary, honestly, and heartbreaking to see that camp still in operation summer after summer when I know how unsafe it is for children. And their Kanakuk Child Protection Plan that they tout as a gold standard, we've had that audited and looked at by so many different subject matter experts, and it's been deemed just kind of a joke. And but parents will do their diligence, I'm putting that in quotes, and say, oh no, they have a Kanakuk Child Protection Plan, it's safe now. But then they don't actually dig into the questions behind that. So that was the origin story of beforeyougodocamp.com, which is now been so elevated by the experts that contributed via Safety Navigator, our partners over at Safety Navigator. And so when it comes to the Mystic situation, I can only imagine what those families must feel like to hear people say a camp where 27 girls died and one Girl SEAL steward is still missing should reopen. I mean, I don't understand the other side. I don't. And I think, it goes back to this generational camp loyalty. And that's probably hard for a lot of people in your audience to understand if they didn't grow up in it. But if this had been a daycare or any other, youth serving organization with even one death, it would have been shut down immediately. So, the process played out how it did. And I under the same leadership, but 27 girls were not evacuated and died. You mentioned there had been changes. Not really. I mean, this has been reported on their application had activities listed like snorkeling in the Guadalupe River looking for unique objects. How insensitive when we know that Seal Stewart is still missing and the search is ongoing and these families are still living through the worst nightmare imaginable. So back to my North Star is giving victims a voice and centering survivors and those with proximity to an issue. That's what the No More Victims Alliance is about. It's putting the infrastructure in place to elevate and amplify voices of truth and ensuring that victims are in the lead on what should happen in a situation like this. I mean, I think outside opinions have, they don't get to override what these families are going through and what their, the respect, the dignity that they deserve. Just pause for a minute and let's reflect and memorialize and see these investigations play out. There's a state-led investigation. There's now a criminal investigation into Camp Mystic in the Eastlands. And then there are civil lawsuits investigating gross negligence, wrongful death. And until there are answers, in my opinion, parents should not be sending their children to a place that has not, the investigations are still ongoing and there's not been a full accounting of what happened there.
I appreciate that, your perspective and your proximity to the story, your own family experience as well. In a recent hearing that took place involving Camp Mystic, there were questions about how many changes had been made. And when the camps the family members that were still remaining in charge of the camp struggled to answer some of those questions about how these changes would look in the summer ahead. And this is part of what appears to be what went into this decision to not reopen the camp. So as you mentioned, investigations ongoing. And here we are still, it's still such a recent history. So I know it's fresh in everybody's mind going into this summer.
It has not even been a year.
Right.
And
go ahead. I'm sorry, Elizabeth.
No, I think of 9/11. They didn't rebuild the World Trade like the next year. Like it has been not even a full year gone by, and their plan to reopen the camp was going to be, opening day was going to be Sarah Marsh's birthday, one of the Heavens 27's birthdays. And that's just so insensitive as well. It just tells you where their head has been. And back to like a lot of these camps, you alluded to this. I'll say it outright. Kanakuk Ministries, which is the camp, operates these camps in Missouri, they have between 35 and 45 million in annual revenue. And then Camp Mystic has about 10 million in annual revenue from summer camp operations. And so while Kanakuk is technically a church under IRS status, so a nonprofit, Camp Mystic's a family business and a for-profit. And so I think that family needs to just stop and reflect and grieve the loss of the patriarch, their own loss, and get some trauma therapy and before they're operating another summer there. I can't imagine what the survivor campers feel. Also, I mean, they have been traumatized, and that is real. But if there's still the same leadership in place this summer that there was when 27 girls died and hundreds were not properly evacuated, I don't understand the argument. And that issue's been resolved with them saying we're not going to reopen this summer. And again, proud of the parents' voices who brought the truth forward. And these investigations will bring even more truth to light. And, my favorite verse is Ephesians 5:11 about bringing darkness to light. And that's what needs to continue to happen in the camp industry writ large.
The imagery of dark versus light is important. As you mentioned, these businesses or these nonprofits are valuable businesses and entities, but our children are completely invaluable. And so we want to make sure to protect them. How do you, just a final question, Elizabeth, like, how do you navigate this as a parent? Do your kids not go to camp? Like, how do you do this? Knowing all that how has that impacted the way that you parent? What is some practical advice you could provide our audience about maybe the way that you operate in your family or some simple tips that we can carry with us into this summer?
Yeah, my kids do day camps. We enroll them in different sports camps depending on their interests. And we ask questions of those organizations or programs before they're enrolled. Same with their schools and anywhere we're entrusting their care. And that's why I'm so grateful to Safety Navigator and this parent guide. While it was intended for camps, it can apply to all these other places that you send your children as well. I mean, it's everything from aquatic safety to parent communication. I'm looking at the 9 categories here: staff training, staff recruitment and screening. And so before you go to camp.com is not just for camps, but applies more broadly. I'll say, another thing that I've gotten my head in the game more is like on this tech stuff, kids and online safety. And
Yes.
I know that's a topic that your audience is very interested in as well. Like, how do we parent in these times? And so we do a lot with our kids just on educating them about what can go wrong online and not sheltering them from the realities of this world, but equipping them and empowering them, that if you come across something, you see something, you say something to us, you won't be in trouble. These are guardrails and boundaries, not to prevent you from having fun, but to protect you and your friends. And so, that's a whole nother level to this conversation, Jenna. But
well, and by the way, I do want to mention you do have a book coming out. Is that this year, Elizabeth? I wanted to mention that at the beginning because you're in all of this. You're also writing a book. Do you want to just give us a little preview of that?
I have a manuscript.
Okay, that's a big deal.
I'm working on it because we're like, where does it end? Really?
That's the story for every mother.
maybe once we get Trey's law passed federally, I don't know where this ends, but
we'll send up some good juju that way that it happens before the midterms. So then that would be good. We're gonna get that as the.
Thank you. But I will one more point on your last question.
Yes.
We don't spend the summer majority in Texas, and so I'm not looking at Texas law when I'm sending my kids. I have to look at the state laws where we're sending them to a day camp. And so that's what my kind of call to action oriented thing would be for your audience is look at the state regulations wherever you're sending your child to a program or whether that's a camp or summer school, daycare, and ask questions that are unique to that regulatory environment because every state has different laws. We are working on a national map through Safe Summers and the Safety Navigator so that parents can see a national map of what states require what rules and regulations. So once that's available, I'll follow up with you because I'm sure parents watch your show and listen. Your audience will appreciate that too. And as far as camp safety goes, legislatively, we have passed background checks in Missouri this session, thanks to parents of that Heavens 27 coalition.
Wait, that wasn't a law?
Right.
No.
So 14 states, it was 15 until it passed in Missouri. 14 states did not require background checks on summer camp staff. 9 states did not require residential camps to be licensed. 8 states did not require day camps to be licensed. And so we are working on this national landscape, but we're starting with this mapping exercise so that parents can be informed. Knowledge is power, and parents can be informed once we have this map up as to what states require what baseline protection measures for kids. And then they can make a more informed decision on where they send their child.
I love that. I would love that resource to be able to share it because you're right. That's really specific. And just to listen, it's not easy to ask questions. I had to cold call like a media office the other day. I've been doing this for 20 years. I still hate doing it. It's not, when you're asking kind of a pointed question, it's a little bit uncomfortable. So my advice is not just to our audience. This is what I'm going to try to implement is not, do you do background checks? It's, what kind of background? So just a little curiosity. So how's your day? What kind of background checks do you do for your camp counselor? Oh, how do you rescreen them? Like how do you do that?
And you do that, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's instead of the do you background check or do you rescreen, just give it a little who, what, where, when, how, and why. Mm-hmm. And usually you get a little bit more information. So that's what I'm going to try to do.
All in here. There it is. So this is for parents before summer camp. Kids are worth it. Know before you go to camp.com or thesafetynavigator.org/parent guide.
Oh, then Elizabeth, I was like, you know what? I might want to go to camp. They're having those like mom camps where you can surf and like eat healthy food. I'm like, I wouldn't have asked any of these questions. I would just have been grateful to get on the plane. So
You know what? Check me in. But I'll say that, we want to preserve the American tradition of summer camp. We just want it to be safe. And so that's, I think, my final message is camps aren't bad. They're not all a Kanakuk situation. And, we can do better for our kids. And I get accused of being bitter because I continue to call things out about Kanakuk, where my brother and so many other victims were harmed. Beyond Pete Newman, we know of over 90 perpetrators affiliated with Kanakuk and its associated ministries and Joe White's entities, which are sprawling. So, I think there are thousands of victims from Kanakuk involved in the abuse that's gone on there for decades. But that is an extreme example. A lot of camps are operating in good faith, and just giving them the tools and templates provided by the Safety Navigator app, which you can also download as a parent. There's tools for parents on the app as well, but it started out as an app for camps to get these tools and templates so that they can adhere to best practices. So we're here to make camp safe again. And thank you for giving this time and for caring. And I think consumer demand is where we can really apply the pressure. When parents start asking these questions and not giving camps business that don't have the right answers, and rewarding the camps that are doing the right thing and giving their business there, that's how we ultimately shift the tide and raise the bar. So I hope this resonates with your audience, and we'll continue to keep you updated as these resources roll out.
I'm excited to stay in touch and excited for your book when it does come out. I know what a big accomplishment that is. So please count us in when you do that. Maybe we could do a little book club with SmartHER News. But I do feel smarter on camp safety, and that's always the goal. How do we, how can we take a topic and feel smarter about it? And I definitely feel that today, Elizabeth. So thank you very much. Also, just a note, calling a woman bitter is like calling her intense. It's a nice way to kind of push her down, which I know is not working, but I just want to point out to everybody that those are some of the key words that you have to watch out for. So it definitely has a visceral reaction.
Yeah, it's like telling a woman to calm down has never had the effect intended.
Right. Not suggested, and also ineffective, as we see. So, Elizabeth, thank you for all your expertise, your experience, sharing your family story, sharing Trey's story again, and for taking the time to join us in SmartHER News. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jenna.